All right, so we are back
Welcome back to
again.
Playing in Traffic.
After all this time, we're back. And we are going to talk with Michele Colón again today. We're so excited to talk today more about her story. And so last time we left the story, we were speaking about
We mentioned the lawsuits, but now we're going to really find
right.
out
So
what
we
happened.
talked about her path of getting into the church and kind of noticing these red flags and what happened within her marriage. And then after leaving the marriage, then Michele was abruptly hit with a lawsuit. And so that is something that we wanted to really talk to you about, Michele, because um, that's not something that the church ever talks about, or ever discloses information about or
Oh, yeah.
is public about. So we're excited to hear your side of the story today.
Yes, so in December 11th of 2011, they filed the first lawsuit in the state of Virginia. And they filed it in Virginia because that's where Tyler was and that's where the website was registered. So even though I didn't live there, they sued me in Virginia um, because it was registered there. And they sued us for $12 million.
$12 million. I thought it was. I mean, 4 million is still a lot, but I didn't know it was 12 million.
Well,
As if you have $12 million.
and we don't.
What are they talking about? $12 million for what? What were they trying to sue you for?
So they alleged that the comments that I made about them online were defamatory, meaning that they weren't true. Um, so they sued me for saying things like World Mission Society Church of God destroys families, or they try to take all of your money. Um, things about their fasting requirements, things about their time requirements, all
And
things
sleep,
that I
maybe things like
experienced in the church,
that.
by the way. Um, and so I got dismissed from that lawsuit like 6 months after it was filed because you're not really allowed to be sued in a state that you don't live in or have business contacts in, or you deal with that state directly somehow, right? It's something called like minimum contacts they have to establish. And at that point, I'd never even been to Virginia. So I'm like, yeah, this is not gonna work. So it still took 6 months to get dismissed from that lawsuit, and then Tyler had to continue it. And he lost his life savings defending himself in this lawsuit for however many months it went on after that. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head right now.
Did he
But
have a lawyer, or was he self-representing himself?
he had a lawyer.
Oh,
Yeah,
so expensive.
right. Over the course of this lawsuit, which had to have been less than a year, he spent $90,000. So his life savings were gone, like everything was gone. And I, felt terrible about it because he'd never even been a member. He'd never had a family member in the cult, nothing. This was sort of something he wanted to do from an apologetics perspective because, he wanted to defend his religion and his beliefs, and he thought, um, that this group was wrong. And so, you know, that happened. And then,
Did his case get dismissed also?
so that's what I was about to explain. So, okay. So there's a process called discovery in a lawsuit. That's where, the evidence gathering on both sides. And so the church wanted an order from the court that would prevent Tyler from posting any information that he got in discovery as part of the lawsuit online, right? And the court in Virginia rejected that. They said, no. If you want to sue him in a public forum, he has the right to make the information that he gets in this lawsuit also public. So had they continued the lawsuit in Virginia, Tyler would have been able to post anything that they submitted in discovery online for everybody to see.
Wow.
Um, and so I believe that that's why the church dismissed their own lawsuit. Like they took a voluntary dismissal in Virginia shortly after that decision. um, It's the decision is on the examining site. It's actually an interesting read. If you just read the last 2 paragraphs, it's spectacular. The judge was not about to let them, seal everything and keep everything secret after putting him through this public trial, and so, or a public, proceeding.
Well, one of the accusations, I forgot to write it down, but one of the church's accusations against you guys is that you were taking away donating members from them. And they put one honest thing in the whole thing. It's the only thing they cared about was that members that could have donated are leaving.
Right, but at the same time, like if you file a lawsuit and you claim $12 million in damages, you have to be able to prove that you lost $12 million in damages specifically to something that I said, right? Now, nothing that I said on the examining site or in my 5-part story or any of the other comments that they allege were defamatory were things that had never been online before, right? The thing was that World Mission was able to have those other platforms and other websites and blogs and stuff taken down with the threat of legal action. So this tactic has sort of worked for them before. So before the lawsuits, they tried to file cease and desist letters with like the hosting company for the website. And when that didn't work was, when they filed the lawsuit. So usually just that step would have gotten them what they wanted. And
Because that is scary. Like, oh shit, this church is coming at me for $12 million. That is scary. When you first found out that they were filing this lawsuit against you, how did you feel?
the first thing that came to my mind was, well, I guess they don't think the world's really going to end in 2012 because here we are days away from 2012 and they filed this lawsuit. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Right.
this makes absolutely no sense. And I remember my husband was very nervous, before we separated about the world coming to an end. And he told me that he believed that the world would end in 2012 or possibly sooner. So that was the first thing that I thought. And I had no idea what I was about to experience because, I had great faith in the legal system at the time. And I thought, I have the right to free speech. I said what happened to me. Those are my opinions. This shouldn't be a big deal, right?
Right.
Wrong. And so, so it took about 6 months or so for me to get dismissed from that lawsuit. And then when they dismissed their lawsuit voluntarily in Virginia, they just refiled in New Jersey. So they came after me here, filed the lawsuit again. And again, I thought, okay.
Was Tyler on that one, or at this point they were like, okay, now we're just gonna go after you?
So they tried to add Tyler, but they were going to face the same problem that
Right.
Tyler doesn't have. They wouldn't have jurisdiction over him in New Jersey either. So they did try to add him, and they lost that motion for the same reason that they, weren't able to go after me in Virginia. So that was stupid, in my opinion. So, and so when that didn't work, they tried to add Mark as a plaintiff against me as well. So they amended their complaint against me in New Jersey, which means they revised it. So they filed an initial one, and then they revised it 2 more times. So they were trying really hard to intimidate me and to get me to take the website down.
And that was in July of 2012. They filed in New Jersey against you, and that was a second lawsuit.
I believe that was the date. Yeah. I knew that what they wanted was just for me to take the website down, but I absolutely refused to do
Was
that.
it for the same amount? Like, did they just copy and paste the one from Virginia?
I think they made it 6 million. I don't remember, to be honest with you. Yeah, or they didn't put an amount eventually because they revised it so many times that I can't remember what they ended up with. I think that they started with a lower amount and then ended up not putting an amount on their second amended complaint, but I'd have to verify. But yeah, I mean, I again thinking, okay, well, this shouldn't last long because it's still the same issue. It's still my opinion, still not defamatory. I mean, I had like screenshots of other blogs where these statements have been said about them many other times, and they're only coming after me, right?
Right.
And so they actually said in court that the reason they were coming after me was because I had the #1 website, against them out there. And it was basically like, well, you're our target because you're the most organized or you have the most information. And they were upset about how highly we ranked on Google. They like made all these kinds of arguments in court. And I'm like, yeah, still my opinion though.
Right. They're
So
scared. Yeah, they were
yeah.
scared.
So I thought again that it wasn't, going to last that long because I thought, okay, like this should be like an easy case here. Um, Nothing's gonna change. Like these were my opinions. This is what happened to me. Like anyway, so I believed strongly in my defense, and in a defamation case, you know how the burden of proof is usually like on, yeah, so they have to actually prove that what I said was false in order for them to win. And
Right.
I don't know how they were going to do that because they had ruined people's relationships and they had taken large amounts of money from people, and basically everything that I said actually had happened. And I believed that they knew that at the time as well. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, like like they know that what I said was absolutely true. I don't know why they're pretending as if it wasn't. And so we filed our motion to dismiss, and again I'm thinking like, oh, this isn't going to take that long, like, but it ended up dragging on for 2 years. um yeah, over 2 years, because it was
Did you,
their
did you
case is
guys like go in front of a judge together, like at the same time?
yeah, so we you do have motion hearings even before a trial, so they file their complaint, we file the motion to dismiss, then the court's going to hear both sides on the motion to dismiss, and then give a ruling. And so we did have many hearings over those
And so do you
years.
have to pay a lawyer for each of those hearings?
So my lawyer at the time was pro bono, thank goodness.
Oh.
He, Paul Grosswald, he had been in Scientology, so he had been in a cult, he understood the issues. So he took the case on pro bono, which I was very happy about. Um, so from what I understand, the church, like, I forgot to mention, their lawyer from Virginia, he died like around the time that they took they took their voluntary dismissal. And I heard later on that they told some of the church members that it was my lawyer that died.
Oh, wow.
Like a see what happens when you fight against God kind of thing. Like we were,
Yeah.
um, which when I heard that, I was like, what? That's insane. I think somebody wrote into the examining side and told us that. Um, but yeah, so here we are in New Jersey, and the motion to dismiss was denied. I think the court was trying to give the church the benefit of the doubt and try to prove their case, but they made the process very difficult because they dragged it on for as long as possible. They made like the weakest arguments. Like it was something that just was very, very time and energy consuming. And at that time, because the lawsuit was like so intense and it had me like so upset that like, why is this dragging on for so long? Like I didn't write anything for a while because they were constantly bringing up like anything that I did online in court. Like I remember like retweeting something and they brought that up in court, and I'm like, leave me alone. Like, they were just like constantly watching everything that I was doing. So for a while I didn't feel comfortable really writing or publishing anything. So that was really upsetting me because like I said, that was a huge part of the recovery process for me. So now they've taken that away from me. So it was a really, really hard time, those few years that case lasted. And it was, I mean, it felt like it was never going to end, you know. Ultimately, the court did dismiss their case, um, for many reasons. One of them was failure to comply with discovery. Like the court had ordered them many times to produce certain financial statements as proof that they lost money because of something I said, and they consistently did not do that, or they provided something that was not sufficient according to the court. I remember the judge saying like, you know, I've been on the bench for X amount of years, and when we ask for financial statements in discovery, like this is not it, and you should know that. Like they just produce like some sheet. They're on the examining site, as a matter of fact. It's just like a list of their expenses, but like no receipts, no nothing. And she said that that was not sufficient, that they were not complying with the order, and you know she gave them another chance, and then they still didn't submit it, and their expert reports were like garbage, and the judge even said that, obviously not in those words. um but you know it became clear that they had no damages, and in fact they made more money as the years went on. Even though I had written the things that they said were defamatory, they were still bringing in more money year over year. And so, I mean, and it was more money than I even thought. Like, I think in 2012 in New Jersey, they brought in over $7 million in donations, if I'm not mistaken, on the figure.
In one state,
Yeah, I
right?
don't know if
In
it
one
was just Ridgewood or the churches that they controlled, but $7 million
right,
is still a lot of,
right, right.
and we don't even know if those statements were accurate, because again, they didn't back them up with anything else. No receipts, no bank statements, nothing. It was just what they wrote down, and that was it. So like I could write on a paper that I have $5 million, doesn't mean it's true. So that's why the court was not satisfied with that as evidence. And so their case was dismissed for that and for other reasons as well. The court also said that me calling them a cult was not defamatory, that that was an opinion. So to me, that was a big deal, winning that battle, because they're a cult. Like they are what they are. And okay, like you might not agree with it, but that's my opinion, you know?
Yeah.
Various definitions that I've read, like you fit it. You are a destructive cult, period. And
I mean,
so
we
like,
jokingly wrote the disclaimer song, but like the more and more that we're doing this, I'm so glad we wrote that and have been putting that in, because it's exactly the truth. It's like this is just my opinion, but in case you get tempted, don't sue us. Just like talking about like our opinion. And
I mean, I think that things have come a long way since then. I remember back then, like it was very difficult to get any news media outlet to really cover them. And then when they did, they got scared from the lawsuits. So we were supposed to do Anderson Cooper. Like we had the dates booked, the disclaimer signed and everything, and last minute they backed out because of the lawsuits.
whoa.
Yeah, so
Like news media didn't want to get sued.
right. So like
Interesting.
so even though I think they knew that the lawsuits were a losing battle, they were still benefiting from them because I wasn't publishing anything and they were stopping media from covering the story. So perhaps that was,
As we're hearing, so many people heard the opposite was true while they were happening, so they were using it on the inside. People that have come out have, like, I've constantly heard this, like, I heard that you started the lawsuits.
no.
So the fact that they were twisting it to be the opposite, that they like you came after them first, like they were using it on the inside to like continuously like get people to, if you hear anything about this, she came after us and we were just defending ourselves. Like,
Yeah,
And this is
depending
the
on what
work of evil
location you're at.
spirits. Like they made it all spiritual, that
Mhm.
this was all prophesied to happen, that in the last days people would go against mother. So she was fulfilling the prophecies, right? According to them, according to Inside.
Yeah, so one thing that I didn't mention in the last episode was that when the night, I don't know, I think it was the night of that my ex-husband ultimately left the house for the last time. I remember showing him the IRS forms that I had requested, and the one for California specifically, where the IRS asks to what the history of the church is, and how they told the story about Juchil Kim, the general pastor, having some sort of vision. They didn't even specify a specific date. And for a group that's so obsessed with dates, I thought that was odd. And when I showed it to him, I was like, there's no mention of the mother god in here. There's no mention of An Sang Hong in here. Like, this is a completely different story. Like, how is this okay that God is basically lying? And he's like, oh, well, it wasn't her that filled out the paperwork. Okay, but if she's God, she knows everything. So she should know that this happened, and she should have.
This is an official tax document, right? Like for them to be
Exactly.
non-exempt. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Tax exempt.
Tax exempt.
In my opinion, I think that is very sneaky to do, because as long as you pretend like, as long as you are a Christian-based religion, you're going to pretty much stay under the radar in the U.S.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
any hint of like our God the Mother, I think any, in the U.S. government, they'd be like, "Excuse me, what did you just say?" It might raise red flags, and I'm sure whoever's filling those documents out knows that.
Yeah. So,
in my opinion, allegedly.
I mean, yeah. So, his response to that was, well, God can do whatever God wants. And I'm like, okay, but does that sound like the God in the Bible that you believe in so much, that God's just gonna lie about something so small? Like, they tell you to like boast about God and be proud of what you believe in, but here you have the tax exempt form doing the exact opposite. And why is that okay? So he said to me, he's like, you know what? Nothing you ever do online or research online is ever going to make a difference, because what you're doing is fighting against God. And I remember saying to him, like, well, I guess we'll agree to disagree about that, because at that point, I'm like, I'm not letting this go. You know what I mean? Like, this is bad. The fact that like I can show you a document like that's signed by them or their representative, where they told a completely different story than what they teach you, and you're just like, oh well, God can do whatever God wants. Like, that's serious. You know what I mean? Like the level of brainwashing, and yes, I am going to use that word because that's what it is, or that level of manipulation, um, is pretty severe, you know? Um,
At that
so
point, they couldn't make you do anything. They could make you believe anything because you have the evidence right in front of you.
right. And that was like the other thing that concerned me. I'm like, if he believes in this strongly, like if they asked him to do something, criminal or whatever, I don't think he would hesitate to do it. And I've heard that from other people who were members for a long time. They've told me like, well, if they would have told me to kill myself or to shoot somebody, I would have just done it, right? Because mother told me to. So, I was also concerned about that. I'm like, this is not, this is just setting up to be like a really bad thing. And that just motivated me more, to try to help other people, even though I couldn't help him necessarily. But yeah, that was sort of the way he said it too, with like that kind of arrogant tone. It was almost like a challenge. You know what I mean? It's like, well, nothing you ever do is going to make a difference because you're fighting against God. So it's like a losing battle, basically, is what he was telling me. Here we are years later, and a lot of people have left, thank goodness, um, as a result of the information that was made public, and the information that was already public but just wasn't out there for people to see.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever thought that anyone was going to request their, applications for tax exempt status and put them
Right.
out there, right? They probably thought that those were private. They're not. So,
That's why that site is so amazing, because Michelle has like sections where you can just see all the public documents, all the IRS forms in all the different states, and it's all put in one place. I just love that so much.
I love too that it's like a safe site. Like as an ex-family member, like finding out that there were fake sites out there that they were just trying to like get information from. I'm sure I've like read those and posted on them, like not knowing. And so
yeah,
know that there is like a spot to go, that you're not being tricked. Like your emails are not being hacked into. You're not being monitored. You're not giving them any inside information. That's really like a good safe space for people to go to.
yeah. I
And
mean,
over the years, it's proven to be safe. I mean, since the beginning of, I mean, the site has been there for a while. And I think it's really gained credibility. And yeah, so people do feel comfortable going there for information and knowing that that information will be accurate.
yeah, we we always went to great lengths to verify all of the information that we got, especially when we got into getting like the census records for An Sang Hong, or pictures of his gravesite, and having like other court documents translated. So there, court documents for lawsuits in Korea as well on the website. There was also a lawsuit against some protesters in California. Um, and as of right now, the cult hasn't won any of these battles against anyone, you know. Have they perhaps succeeded in silencing some people with the threat of those lawsuits? I'm sure. But when it comes to actually winning a case in court, we've yet to see one. I think they won one in Korea, but it was overturned on appeal, their decision later on.
Can we do that? I'm on your site, you have like everything broken down into detail, but can we just go over like really quickly how many lawsuits they have out there?
Yeah.
Like I think I wrote it out, like how many people they've gone after, how many people they initiated.
So they went against G1 Tech, that's one person. Then they went against me and Tyler in Virginia, me in New Jersey, and then against Diane Sims and the other protesters in California. Then other names I can't pronounce in Korean, and another pastor in Korea as well. I'm not sure how many people that is altogether. As I was saying before, I think that the media and just the public in general has come a long way. I remember the turning point for me was when HBO did the documentary on Scientology. They hired over 100 attorneys for that documentary because they knew, I mean, Scientology has gone after people a lot over the years as well. They
So
knew
all
that.
we need is 100 attorneys.
Yeah, it was 140, some crazy
Shit.
number. Yeah, it was almost like an attorney per minute of the documentary.
It's like no wonder that, no wonder news companies don't want to cover these, because who can afford to hire 140 something attorneys, right? Like,
No, exactly.
which is probably why they do these lawsuits. That's exactly why they do it, to intimidate people from getting information out.
Right,
But
I
Michelle
think,
you were on the USA Today.
yeah,
Or the Today Show.
The Today Show. Did we put a link to that? I don't remember. If we haven't put a link, we'll put one. But Michelle was interviewed in that, and I didn't know you were in it. The first time I saw it, Tony was still in the church, and I cried my baby eyes out because, my sister's in this church, and then watching that girl and her family struggle, and I was just like, I feel you guys, like the parents, just like, I just want to give you guys a hug. And then like now it's so cool that like I'm speaking to you on a podcast. And you were like interviewed in that episode. And I had no idea until we started talking. So
That's why Michelle's been in it since, the beginning. She's been fighting a long time. Did you ever think, when you joined, that this would be happening?
No.
Or even that you would come out and that you would still be having to battle with them? It's so infuriating.
Not at all. I mean,
But it's important work because you're paving the path, so that others feel brave to do it, that others aren't scared to speak out, because it is possible, right? I also want to mention, because we talked about all those lawsuits, there are lawsuits that have been filed against the church, right? Just to be fair. So as we spoke with Raymond, because Raymond wanted to get his NDA nullified, which he was able to do that, and he won that case.
Yep.
And
they
then
lost the appeal.
Right. So again, they haven't won any of those.
No.
And then you also sued them, right, in 2013?
2013 and 2016. So I have two lawsuits against them, but they were combined.
Okay.
So the 2013 lawsuit was for the hacking of my accounts, and then the 2016 lawsuit is it's called malicious abuse of process, I believe. So basically, they filed a frivolous lawsuit against me, knowing that the statements I made were my opinions, or they knew that the statements were true, and they did it anyway as a way to try to silence me. So you're not allowed to use the court system to do that. And so that's what this lawsuit is about. And the reason why I felt really strongly about filing that lawsuit was because I felt like, even though their lawsuit against me was dismissed, I felt that I still wanted to speak out about them. So it would only be a matter of time before they would just come back after me and sue me all over again. And I did not want to go through that process all over again from the beginning. It was insane. Or in the alternative, they would go after somebody else who perhaps would have no interest in fighting against them. And it's not.
Which you wouldn't blame them, because
I wouldn't.
number one, you're going through trauma trying to get out of this doomsday cult. Like, already you're trying to just survive and get through all of this anxiety of getting out of a cult. And then just to think about fighting for, they're trying to sue you for millions of dollars. I mean, that just sounds so exhausting that I would imagine that most people don't want to fight.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler was one of those people. Like, he had the
Yeah.
opportunity to also sue along with me for the same reason, but he couldn't do it. It's definitely not for everyone. It is very, very stressful, very time consuming and emotionally exhausting
And
because,
financially exhausting and draining, I'm sure.
and it's like you're reliving it every time you have to talk about it, right? You can't just let it go. Um, so for me, it was really important to get justice for him, for Tyler, and for me, and to be able to, you know, set a standard where, like, no, you're not going to go after everyone who expresses their opinion about you because you have the money to intimidate people. Like, that's not how this works. So if they didn't come after me, they were going to go after somebody else. And unfortunately, their efforts might have worked, you know? So, um, and I had a lawyer who was very supportive. So yeah, I filed that lawsuit against them, and here we are, still in it. Right now, it's scheduled for trial in September, but who knows? The pandemic really slowed things down as well. But yeah, so I've been in litigation with them for over a decade now. It is crazy. Like, it's not how you see on TV where, like, the problem is solved in 45 minutes without the
Hmm.
they have a verdict and that's it. Yeah, that's really not how it works. Like, I knew that wasn't how it worked, but I never would have imagined that a decade later I'd still be fighting them, you know? But I think it's really, really important. I feel very, very strongly about it. You know, the same way that they claim they have their right to religion, right? Same First Amendment that protects other people's right to free speech, and they should not be able to go after people just because they are like the bigger fish, right? They have endless amounts of money.
Thank you, because we probably wouldn't have done the freaking podcast. Like, if we could didn't have you as like our example of like what to possibly do if they ever came after us,
Mm-hmm.
we would be too, like, we've talked about doing the podcast for like a while, and so many times we're like, but what if they sue us? And then we're like, you know what, they can sue us, but they're not like, we're allowed to like talk about your experience. You don't have to be quiet about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't believe it sometimes, you know? Um, because at the beginning, like, I was pretty much the only one really talking about them back then. So it was a very lonely time, you know, like nobody to really talk to. So we did have the forum, so that helped for people to network and stuff. And of course, the cult was, or members of the cult were in there arguing with everybody. But whatever. We didn't have a problem with that. But if you ever tried to have a debate on one of their websites, like, they don't approve your comment, or they're probably stealing your password or whatever. Um, so, we created a space for them. They could argue as well. So we had it open for everyone. I mean, it still is, but um,
We've
yeah,
seen some of those YouTube comments, like when there's a Great Light Studios
yeah,
video, and the way that some of those people defend the church is just so like vile and awful. And Tony's sent me screenshots where she's like, this is so crazy to me that these people think that they're representing God, but they're saying these like awful things to other humans on the internet. Like, it's just very vile, and it's
there's very much that us versus them mentality in there. Tony, I'm sure, remembers, like, everybody on the outside is either spiritually dead or possessed by the devil if they've been in the church before and left for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know. It's really hard. Like, I don't know. It's just a really hard situation, because it's like you want to do what's right, but it's so exhausting. It really,
it's
really.
probably not a great feeling also to know that you're being used in this entire cult as like the symbol of Satan. That can't feel good.
I mean, um, it does somewhat though, because I was in the group, I know what that means, right? So
Yeah.
if they're going to the length of, like, to that great length of saying, like, don't talk to her, or showing their congregation photos of me and doing like PowerPoint presentations about me and the website and telling them different stories, that to me proves that I'm making a difference, right? That
Yeah.
the goal that I set out to, that it's working. So in a way, yeah, I mean, it upsets me because some people, when they leave, they still have this idea of me, like I'm, still this mean person, or I'm still possessed by the devil, or whatever it is. And they might not necessarily be willing to talk to me.
Yeah.
So that part upsets me because I don't think that's fair,
Yeah.
But the fact that the church thinks that I'm possessed by the devil doesn't really bother me.
Do you have a cartoon about you? Because I really want one.
No, no, they haven't made a cartoon about me. I mean, I think they made one that looks like it's about Raymond, but
Yeah. It allegedly, in our opinion, looks totally like Raymond.
I know. And like
So,
Raymond's like the last person you would have thought that I would like, speak to even, right?
I love that.
I know.
can you
Yeah.
just quickly explain that about how that,
Yeah.
whatever you'd like to share about you and Raymond?
Yeah, so Raymond reached out to me through Steve Hassan, which is a cult expert. Most of the members have heard about him and also think that he's possessed by the devil, but that's a separate issue. And at first, I thought it was some sort of trap, right? Because I'm like, Raymond of all people, like he was in the room, and then during that meeting, and like he was in charge of getting Mark to leave me, like I knew that sitting there, so and the fact that like Steve Hassan told me he left, I'm like, I didn't believe that, like that didn't sound realistic to me. I'm like, wait, what? Like he left? Like he was so close to the pastor, and like so that was hard for me to believe at the time, for sure. So I was like really apprehensive at first. I'm like, there's no way, that he left and now he's, looking to talk to me. But Steve Hassan was like, no, he really did leave, and like, he just wants to talk to you. So, I think he gave me his number. And I ultimately did call him, and he apologized for what happened and everything. And, I didn't hold any negative feelings against him because I knew that whatever he did because the cult basically made him do it. I know what it's like to be in there and how controlling they are. And, the idea that he would have done any of this on his own is ridiculous, So,
Yeah, after speaking with him, you're like, he's one of the nicest people I've ever spoken to.
yeah.
You're like, I can't imagine him doing anything malicious, like on his own idea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he was recruited very young too. So, I mean,
I'm glad you guys are friends and have, like met each other on the outside. And
yeah, definitely. Like, he's also like my number one witness in the cases, ironically. You know what I mean? I think the church probably didn't count on that, and they have tried to cause like conflict between us in court many times. Because it's not convenient for them for us to be on the same side, because everything that I accuse them of doing, he either saw or had to participate in. So,
It's like they're still continuously trying to break up relationships to stop you guys from communicating and
yeah, they recently tried to disqualify we have the same attorney now, and they tried to get him disqualified because they alleged some conflict that may possibly come up in the future, Luckily the court rejected their argument, but yeah, I mean,
and that was recently, right? Like
yeah,
within
we just had the hearing not too long ago.
Nice.
A couple weeks ago actually. Yeah. So the court rejected that, thank goodness, and the fight goes on, but we'll see.
You're so awesome. Thank you so much for doing it all.
Thank you.
I wish we had like a number of how many people you've helped, because I bet it's in like the thousands and thousands.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to know, but no, just knowing that people left, That makes it all worth it.
And like you said, if you want to stay and you're a consenting adult to what you're doing, but that's not really normally what people encounter. They encounter the slow reveal.
Right. Just like I did. Right.
Yeah. And
They
that's not,
told me from the beginning, oh, we believe this, in a Korean Jesus, and also this lady is God right now in Korea. I'd have been like, no, thank you.
and it's going to end, so you only have like a year to live.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have gone for any of that. So, I don't think that's fair. I think people deserve to hear the truth,
Yeah.
and make their own decisions. And so that, hopefully they can do that now if they have the courage to go to the internet in the first place, because I know that, they discourage that heavily, even though they deny that.
A podcast is not technically internet.
Well, it's not a website, right? Yeah.
It's not a website. So start with the podcast and then dip your toes in. And then once you realize that maybe you want some more, the examining site. No, I think it's the opposite. I think people go to the examining site first and then they're like, oh, cool.
Now it's crazy because back then, like I said, we couldn't get any media to talk about it. And then when we did, they were scared with the lawsuits. And now it's completely different. Like, ever since HBO did that documentary, like now there are shows just about cults, about all cults. Like there's cult everywhere. Which is awesome because obviously this cult isn't the only cult, and there's all kinds of cults out there. So I think that the more that they educate the public, the better, right? So everybody kind of plays their role. I really think that there should be education even in like high school and college about this type of thing, because they love to recruit on campuses. I remember when my son was in college, he saw them recruiting on his campus a couple times, and he would go interrupt and tell everybody about the group and how he knows because he was there, and his mom is fighting them in court and all this other stuff.
Good for him.
Could you imagine what would have to happen in our country to see a law that requires like education about filtering out bad religions? Because people want kids to like pray in school still. Like that's just so like we would have to go so far.
Well, it wouldn't even have to be about religion. It would just be about mind control. What are the signs of mind control? Because it's
they
also
have
like
yoga cults, they have psychology
right. There's all
cults,
kinds of cults.
Right.
Right.
And it would be in the universities and colleges' best interest, because these groups ultimately get some people to quit school.
Right.
It affects their bottom line.
Right.
Obviously.
Most of them end up quitting school.
We should call them like, it's not good for your financials.
Right.
You're going to lose students and tuition.
No, I mean, I think policing the cults isn't really a realistic way of doing it. I think that it's more like an inoculation. Like if you can educate, teenagers and young adults about these groups and just raise awareness, then, they'll be less likely to get recruited and ends up,
Right. Scientology probably still has new members, and they're always going to probably have a few new members.
Yeah. They have a lot less members now, though, after that documentary.
For sure. But like, I feel like if you go into Scientology now, it's like there's stuff out there for you to like know about it. You can kind of do your own research and it's out there. So yeah, I think us just putting out content and like having people be like, I was preached to about this group. Let me like see what's going on with it, and then be like, that sounds cool. I want to join that. To us, it sounds like I don't know why you'd want to, but for them, if they still want to, it's like cool. At least they had the opportunity to hear about it.
They made their own decision, right? Based on both sides, they got to hear. So
Michelle, I feel like I feel like I can really sincerely say this on behalf of like all the former members from this group. We are just so thankful to you for all your hard work, your endless sleepless nights, and all the times you probably wanted to give up, but you didn't. Just thank you so, so much for everything that you've done throughout the years.
Yeah, it was really hard. Like there was a time where they were successful in disqualifying my attorney, and I had to represent myself, and that was like, oh my goodness, it was really bad. Yeah. It was tough because every minute outside of work was spent on legal research and writing motions and opposing their motions, and it was a mess. It was really, really difficult, and I wouldn't want to do that ever again. I think that they thought that if they could disqualify my attorney again, that I would give up, you know, because they had to know that that was like not sustainable for me, probably, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I remember during that time, it was really rough, and I did want to give up, but I didn't, thank goodness, you know. But yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. It does help, you know, to keep.
It's
Um,
really genuinely sincere. Every single person that I meet that has come out, every single person talks about, the work that you've done and all the articles on the website. So it is having a huge impact, a huge, huge impact. So
I hope it
I just hope that you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think about it that way a lot of times because, like I
Mhm,
said, you know, I don't always hear about it, and it's fine. I don't have to. I know
mhm, mhm.
people are leaving, and that's, you know, great. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's good to be reminded sometimes that it's not just that what the work and I'm doing and the articles that I write are just not being thrown out into the void and no one's reading them.
Right,
You know, because
right.
I know a lot of people like YouTube now and like podcasts and stuff. So at one point I thought to myself, maybe people just aren't reading, you know, but then I check, you know, you know, our views and stuff, and I'm like, no, people are still reading, so that's good, you know. So it keeps me motivated to continue to put out content. I have a couple
Yeah.
more things like in the works to come out, so
That's
that's exciting.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody will get, we'll keep posting stuff as it comes out because everything you write, we're just like, whoa, mind
Yeah.
blown again. How is that possible? I feel like I've been like researching this group my whole adult life since Tony's joined it, and I still keep finding out stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
When it took me and Tony probably a few months, a while, like to reach out, not because we were afraid of you or, Tony thought you were demonic, but we were like, she's so busy. She probably wants no more things added to her plate.
Yeah.
So to us, you're like the famous ex-member.
You know, again, I never wanted to, like, the cult made my name, like, they put my name out there as the person who
Right.
wrote all these things. I didn't do that.
Right.
Um, so it's weird sometimes that people will be like, "Oh, I know you," or "I've heard of you," and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Why?" You know, like, or how?
And
Uh,
you're like, "Really, you don't know me." So that's
right?
why I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you were able to come here and explain your side of the story because nobody's heard your side of the story like this.
Yeah, yeah, it's been
So,
a long time coming. I feel
yeah.
like the more I hear what people have heard, like about me and the websites and stuff, and I hear how the the cult has distorted the facts, the more important I felt it was for me to finally like tell my side of the story about like what really happened and let people sort of make their own, you know, decision about me. If they want to still think that I'm possessed by the devil, you know, they have
Mm.
the right to do that. But it was important for me to explain to people that I was a member, that I actually did believe in this church, that I actually did want to defend this church at one point when I thought that perhaps people were lying about them online. Um, and that I'm not just this bitter ex-wife or scorned woman, as they even said in one of their lawsuits against me. You know, it's not about Mark. It hasn't been about him for years now. This is so much bigger than that.
Right.
Yeah, bigger than me, bigger than him, bigger than
What's
our
the
marriage.
quote from the from Raymond's audio where he said, "Well, are those lies or are they just opinions?" And he's like, "Well, it's opinions. They're kind of
Yeah,
you
right.
kind
He's
of
like,
had that argument in that
opinions
meeting,
could be
and
lies. Yeah.
it
So,
was so interesting to hear Raymond, who is like one of the smartest people now that I've like met, like talked to him,
yeah.
It was funny to hear him justifying that argument of just like, well, lies, opinions, kind of the same thing. And you're like, no, lies are lies and opinions are opinions. There's a difference between the two things. I thought that was so fascinating.
Yeah. It's like it's hard to listen to that recording
Mm,
because,
that
you know, like I obviously don't see him the same way, you know, and we're not arguing. You know, it's quite the opposite, right? So it's just
Right.
really, really interesting. Like it's hard to hear it because I, you know, don't see him that way anymore, obviously, you know. It's also hard to hear too because, you know, I hear how my ex-husband was like so gone, like mentally at that time. It's still hard for me to be like, damn, like that really sucks that, you could look at like facts. They're like, look at the sky and say it's not blue. It's basically comes down to that where, yeah, you can't process your own thoughts anymore because they discourage that too. They're like, well, you're using your own mind. Yeah, I am. Like,
Mhm. That's a good thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
when you're in the church, you're told it's bad because
Right.
that's just Satan using your own thoughts to trick you. Like,
Right.
that's just gaslighting.
Right.
That's like manipulation on a whole other level because
Right.
when a group convinces you that your own thoughts are evil, then you can't trust anyone except the cult, right?
I mean,
And
at that point, they win every day in every argument. There's like nothing. Yeah, it's what we were
yeah,
saying before. That's crazy. Like, what
I
are you supposed to do with that mindset? Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't. Like you can't, and that's I think why it's so hard to get people out of this group because once you buy into that, I mean, if you don't trust your own thoughts, you're not going to trust your family or other people that aren't in the church that are just trying to get you out. So I think for everybody, their journey out of the cult is different. And that was also why I wanted to include different types of information on the examining site, like not just the Bible studies, because that isn't the reason for everybody, right? So for someone knowing that they interpreted the Sabbath incorrectly or that they celebrated at the wrong time or that Constantine didn't read about, like for someone that's going to be like it, right? But for someone else, the fact that they lied on those tax forms is going to be the thing that bothers them and the thing that makes them kind of snap back into reality and really reevaluate the group as a whole and their behavior. I used to spend a lot of time debunking their doctrine, right? And going through their Bible studies and saying how they were wrong. And I've since moved away from that because I feel like we've sort of done that. And I tend to focus more on their behavior and how, like, this can't be the true church because this is what they do to people. And if you believe, they always say, we believe the Bible. We're the only ones that believe the Bible. You don't. You know what I mean? Because that's even whether you're a Christian or an atheist or whatever, you can still read the book and get the general message, right? And the general message is not that we destroy everybody's life, so, um, and we manipulate people and we have to control everyone and, take up all their time and they can't be with their family. Like, it's just this whole thing. So yeah, so I tend to focus more on the behavior, the lies that they tell in their documents, the lies that they tell about Ansang Hong's books, and the lies that they tell about their own church history, like the date that he was baptized, like certain verifiable facts. Like I wanted to include a lot more of that information, and so we have focused on both, and how they changed their doctrine also. Like that's really important. How they change his books, right? Like if you believe that that's God, why are you like rewriting his stuff like and making it say something different, you know what I mean? So that to me was a really big deal when I found out about that as well, because there was a time
It's
that
not
I believed.
them. They just pretty much forced you to go to law school for the last decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're just like, not only do you know everything about the church, but you also know legally like what they can and can't get away with. So
Yeah, I've learned a lot for sure over the
yeah.
past few years, and it's only, you know, especially recently reinforced my belief in the law system, where in the beginning I wasn't so sure because I'm like, why is this taking so long? Um, it does work, but unfortunately, like some states have anti-SLAPP legislation and other states don't. New Jersey does not. California was one of the first states to have it. So when your state does have anti-SLAPP laws, the lawsuits go a lot quicker because they have to meet a certain standard from the beginning to even go past, that part. And we didn't have that. And so that was one of the reasons why the lawsuit in New Jersey took so long. Virginia also didn't have that either. Um, but yeah, I've learned like a lot about that. And so,
So so that means like if the church comes after you and they like open a case, the
mhm.
judge will like initially say, are they doing this just to intimidate somebody? And then like immediately dismiss it if they are.
Yeah,
That's
I wouldn't say it's immediately, but it is on a more of a fast track.
Quicker.
it's like
Yeah,
the first thing they look at. They're like, okay, is this really a case or are they just being a
right.
dick? Just want to scare.
Exactly. Like, can it be defamation, or is this just opinions and it's clear that this is just to intimidate this person, or, for some other reason? So yeah, the court is more like, I don't know how the word is, but they look at it from a different perspective very early on.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the case against me in New Jersey, none of the facts of the case changed at the end. Like, all of the arguments we made in the beginning about why the lawsuit was frivolous, in the end were all the same arguments, and were in the end the same thing that the court ended up saying.
Yeah.
So, but the fact that it took that long was because New Jersey doesn't have anti-SLAPP legislation, and so hopefully that's something that will change in the future. I know I've heard of them like considering a federal anti-SLAPP law, so that each state doesn't have like different ones, or having one or not having one. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not there yet. So in the meantime, being educated as much as you can about how these things work, and just, telling your story.
I had an idea, you guys.
Yeah.
As we wrap this up, I was thinking, what if we just kind of put it out there? If anybody has questions for Michelle, that they can write into us, and then we can have maybe, if you want, another time where we just read you the questions and then you can answer.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Because I feel like there may be people out there that want to ask you some things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's perfect. And if anybody wants to be anonymous or anything.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trying to give anybody legal advice, but if they have questions,
not for
the process or what I went through, then yeah, obviously, I'd be willing.
Right.
Good idea, Tony.
I think people will be interested in her story. So if anybody has any questions, let us know.
Definitely, please. Or if you were told something completely different from what, the story I told today, or different from perhaps what other people have heard, we'd like to hear that too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear how everybody across the whole country has a little different bit of a take of it.
And I'm sure all over the world, because I'm sure it's a worldwide site. You get viewers from all over the world.
Yeah. We used to get a lot of views from Cape Town, because they recruit a lot on their college campus down there.
Right.
Yeah, we have a lot of South African countries.
Again, I encourage people to do their research, to weigh both sides, you know what I mean, and make an informed decision. And if you're in this group now, I think I wrote this at the end of the last article that I published, like, think about how much more you're going to get to this cult. They have everything to win, and you have everything to lose. Like, you're not getting anything out of it at all. Even if you do believe in their doctrine, like, they're taking your time, your money, your energy, years of your life, perhaps relationships, perhaps your education, perhaps your 401k, etc. Like, you have everything to lose and they have everything to win. So I feel like in a situation like that, you really need to be sure. And if they're the true church, they would want you to be sure, and they wouldn't be afraid of you doing research and talking to former members, and feeling like you can view other information that might not necessarily support the church and still stand firm in your beliefs. If they're the true church, they wouldn't be so concerned about that. But yeah, I think if you're a current member, and even a former member that is still perhaps you believe in the doctrine still, but you left for other reasons. Because I met somebody recently who's in that situation. And that's difficult, I think, because if you're mentally out for whatever reason, but you still sort of believe in the doctrine, you're kind of not letting go, and I feel like you're not recovering. The best lies have a little bit of truth mixed in, right? So I've heard former members who still believe in the doctrine say, well, their Bible studies make so much sense. Of course, there's parts of those studies that perhaps do make sense, or perhaps would be correct, but they're mixed in with a lot of stuff that is not correct. And so you don't want to hang on to that, one or two things that might be, or that might sound doctrinally sound, or whatever it is, and then ignore the rest that is completely like off the wall, and again, if you have God at the head of your organization, there's no room for mistakes or errors or whatever it is. So like, if they are 5% wrong, then they're totally wrong. Like no part of wrong is acceptable when you say that you have God at the head of your organization. And so I think that if you're a current member, you need to hold them at the standard that they have set for themselves. It's not fair that you say, oh, well, God can do whatever they want, or, oh, and just keep making excuses for them. I mean, your life and your time and your money and everything and your family and your relationships depend on it. And I think that, everybody should do that.
That's perfect.
Boom, baby.